Where did you get this cute little thing?
Makita asked as she flipped through the blank pages of a red journal with black leather trimmings. Oh, I got it at Grandma's reading of her will. Makita raised an eyebrow at me.
And what did Terrence get?
Terrence was my older brother, and the only other friend I had besides Makita. He got Grandma's coin collection.
Girl, your grandma did you so wrong on this one. Are you sure you were her favorite?
I playfully pelted a pillow at Makita and we giggled. Makita replaced the journal on my dresser and sat on the bed next to me.
We seriously need to do something about Diane and her goons. If it wasn't for Mr. Reed, the janitor, I would still be trapped in the girls' bathroom.
Diane, Gina, and Haley were the meanest girls in our high school, but they were also the richest, which made teachers afraid to punish them since their parents donated tons of money to the school. Yeah, I know, but really, what could we do?
I wish your grandma left you some sort of nunchucks or a samurai sword that we could use against them.
Makita demonstrated some karate moves, and I doubled over with laughter.
Anyways, I've got to run. I've got game night at my house tonight.
Makita rolled her eyes at me before waving and walking out my room. I picked up the book Grandma left me and passed my hand over the edging carefully. Grandma had always been there to listen, and now she was gone. I opened the journal and began to write. It may not be much, but at least I can feel as though I'm still talking with Grandma. A few minutes after writing, I went to bed. What happened the next day was totally mind-boggling. But before I continue my story, hey, I'm Jamie. Have you liked and subscribed to our channel yet? If not, what are you waiting for? We have the most amazing stories here. Also, don't forget to tap that notification bell. If you do, your grandma may give you a book like mine. The next day, while talking to Terrence and Makita in the hallway, Diane and her goons walked up.
Hey, Jamie. Today is such a hot day. Maybe I can cool you off.
Before I knew what was happening, Diane was tossing her large cup of juice towards me. Just then, Mr. Purnell, the principal, walked between us and the juice spilled onto him. There was a harmonious gasp. Then an abrupt silence fell over the students in the hallway as we all waited to see what Mr. Purnell was going to do. He glared at Diane.
My office, now!
Diane glared at me with fiery eyes before she turned on her heels and walked off, followed by Haley, Gina, and Mr. Purnell. I can't believe it, I mumbled.
Can't believe what? That evil Diane is finally going to get into trouble for something?
No, I mean, I think I caused it.
Huh?
Makita and Terrence shared a look, then stared at me. Just then, the bell rang and we went to our afternoon classes. That afternoon in my bedroom, I picked up the journal and opened it and showed it to Makita. After reading it, she looked at me wide-eyed.
Do you think?
I nodded my head and grinned. I took the journal from her and read, Dear Journal, Diane needs to be taught a lesson. I wish that tomorrow when she picks on me, that a teacher would intervene and she would get what she deserves. I had written that down last night out of spite.
Do you think this journal will work for crushes as well?
Well, what happened today may just be a coincidence, Kiki. I shrugged my shoulders.
And I'm okay with that as long as I can be a coincidence with Danny Mason.
She pouted her lips and batted her eyes. We laughed a bit before Makita looked at me seriously.
How about you write in your journal that Danny asks me out on a date tomorrow? You know, for experimental reasons.
Makita grinned. For experimental reasons, huh? Makita nodded. I shook my head and laughed as Makita told me what to write, and I made the entry in the journal. That night, as I nestled between my sheets, I couldn't help but wonder, did Grandma's journal have some sort of magic? While sitting at the cafeteria the next day with Makita, guess who came to pay a visit at our table? Danny Mason.
Hi, Makita.
Makita looked at me with a wide grin on her face before containing herself and turning to Danny.
Hi, Danny. What's up?
Danny looked nervous.
Would you like to go to the movies with me tonight?
Sure,
Makita responded in a high-pitched voice that neither one of us recognized. She cleared her throat.
Sure.
I watched as they exchanged numbers.
I'll call you later.
Danny smiled, and Makita returned it. Danny walked away, and as soon as he was out of earshot, Makita shrieked.
Did you see that? I, Makita Garrison, have a date with Danny Mason. You have to help me get ready for my date later.
While it seemed far-fetched that the journal held any magical possibility, Makita and I made a pact to use the book only for good. Over the next few weeks, Makita and I aced tests, teachers we didn't like stayed at home, Diane and her goons kept to themselves, and I even received a puppy for my 14th birthday. Life was great. By this time, Makita and I were firm believers that the journal Grandma left me had magical powers. I mean, how else can you explain why everything I wrote came true? Not wanting to misplace the book or have someone else read its sacred entries, I wanted to protect the book at all costs, so I decided to carry it everywhere. I found myself writing in it during random times of the day, in class, lunchtime, and even during gym class. Other students probably noticed the same thing, as that could be the only explanation for what happened next. One afternoon after gym class, I looked in my bag. Immediately, I felt the room spin around me. I felt nauseous and my legs felt like wet noodles. Grandma's journal was gone. Makita and I looked everywhere. We even told Mr. Holder, the gym teacher, but he refused to check the other students' bags. It was then and there I knew my life was about to change drastically, and not for the better. And there was nothing I could do about it. At lunch the next day, Diane stood on one of the cafeteria tables and cleared her throat loudly.
My fellow students, in my hand, I hold a book that I find quite interesting.
I turned to Makita and rolled my eyes. What does this spoilt brat want? The rest of my words stuck in my throat as I looked on in horror at the book Diane had clutched in her hand. It was Grandma's journal. Before I could get up, I felt my shoulders being pressed down firmly. On either side of me stood Haley and Gina.
Makita,
Diane looked at her from across the cafeteria.
do you really know what your friend thinks of you and your boyfriend Danny?
I shrugged Gina's and Haley's hands off my shoulders as I attempted to get up.
What is she talking about, Jamie? Dear Journal,
Diane read loudly, capturing the attention of all the students in the cafeteria.
I can't believe that I didn't tell Danny how much I liked him before Makita got a chance to. I wish that Danny and Makita would break up and Makita move away so I can finally get my shot with Danny.
Makita gasped next to me, and I felt my face fall as I looked at her.
Jamie, did you write that?
She had a hurtful expression on her face. Makita, I can explain.
Explain?
Makita pushed her chair back and stood up.
You are really going to try to explain the crush that you have on my boyfriend and the fact that you wish we broke up and I went away? Really? I thought you were my friend, but I guess I was wrong.
Makita grabbed her things and walked out of the cafeteria, followed by Danny. My initial thoughts when Haley and Gina finally let me go was to go after Makita, but I could feel the steam escaping from my ears and my blood was boiling. I turned towards Diane and charged at her. I tackled her from the table and she flew onto the ground. The crowd of students around us began to chant, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" It took a few minutes for Terrence to pull me off Diane. Her shirt was torn and her nose was bleeding.
You'll pay for this,
she screamed as Mr. Purnell walked into the cafeteria and ordered Diane and I to his office. Before obeying Mr. Purnell, my eyes scanned the cafeteria floor, where I tussled with Diane to see where the journal fell, but to no avail. Terrence walked with me to the principal's office and waited for me after Mr. Purnell's lecture. That afternoon, Terrence walked home silently since Makita and I weren't on speaking terms. As soon as I got home, I ran to my bedroom and cried. I didn't know how I was going to make it up to Makita or tell my parents that I got suspended for 2 days because I was fighting. During dinner, I decided not to tell my parents about what happened at school, even though Terrence gave me questioning looks all throughout dinner. I ate quickly before retreating to my room. I was surprised when on the dresser sat Grandma's journal. Who put that there? The next 2 days, I dressed as though I were going to school. I changed in one of the public bathrooms before heading to the ice cream parlor about 2 blocks away, where I stayed until it was time to head home. In the journal, I wished that Makita and I would be best friends again because I missed her so much. For those 2 days that I missed school, each evening I would sit with my phone in hand watching it, praying and hoping for a call from Makita or even a text message, but nothing happened. The third day when I was actually supposed to go back to school, I told my parents I wasn't feeling well and stayed curled up in bed the entire day. I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my bedroom door. "Come in," I shouted groggily as I sat up and rubbed my eyes. My brother stepped into the room with a bag of donuts in his hand, which he handed to me.
Hey, how have you been holding up these past few days?
I think Grandma's journal is broken. I wrote in the journal wishing Makita and I would be friends again, but nothing happened. It's been 3 days already. I don't understand why the journal isn't working anymore. I bit into one of the chocolate-filled donuts.
What are you talking about? The journal isn't working anymore.
I sighed heavily as I told Terrence about everything that happened over the past few weeks and how everything we wrote in the journal came true.
Well,
Terrence passed his hand through his hair.
I have a teeny tiny confession to make.
What did you do? I looked at Terrence in disbelief.
Well, Grandma's journal isn't really magical. I sort of read it at night, and I did help with some of the things like Danny and Makeda, but the other things, like Diane spilling her drink over Mr. Purnell, were just coincidental. If you really want to make things right with Makeda, you'll have to call her.
I was shocked at first by his confession. It was all him, and pure coincidence? But then I started to think about what else Terrence was saying. Makeda, I could make things right with her. I knew Terrence was speaking reason, but what could I possibly tell Makeda for her to forgive me? As if reading my thoughts, Terrence wrapped his arms around me and gave me a bear hug. It was one of those hugs where everything felt as though it was going to be okay.
Makeda loves you. Be honest, and I'm positive that she'll forgive you.
Thanks, T. I hugged him tightly before we pulled apart. He ruffled my hair playfully.
Call Makeda,
he said before he walked out of my room. I picked up my phone and held it for about an hour, contemplating how I was going to apologize to Makeda and what I was going to say. Suddenly, there was a knock on my door. "Come in, T," I yelled, expecting my brother to walk into my room. My eyes welled with tears when there in front of me stood Makeda.
I heard you were sick, so I brought you some soup. I hope that's okay.
I nodded, and with tears streaming down my face, I jumped off my bed and hugged Makeda tightly. We stood there crying and apologizing to each other for about 20 minutes before we were able to catch our breath and understand what the other was saying. I wiped my eyes and sniffled. "How about I grab some snacks from the kitchen while you put on some music?" Makeda nodded and sat on my bed and thumbed through her phone for a playlist. I exited the room and went to the kitchen where I met Terrence, drinking a glass of juice by the kitchen table. I looked at him curiously. "Did you have something to do with Makeda coming over?" He looked at me, his eyes twinkling.
It's just a coincidence.
I hugged Terrence quickly. "I love you."
I love you too, kiddo.
I grabbed the snacks and drinks quickly before heading back to my room, where music was already blasting. It has been a few years since I've used the book, and Makeda and I are still best friends. But even today, I still think back on those few months back in high school. So tell me, do you think my grandma's journal had some sort of magic in it? Or do you think some things were just a coincidence? Or maybe, just maybe, there is no such thing as a coincidence.
Mom, come and see this! Mom came bustling from inside the house to the backyard. Aren't they pretty? Look, they're eating from the birdhouse that I made. My eyes sparkled.
You're such a thoughtful girl, honey. Those birds are so lucky.
I beamed at Mom, who smiled at me before heading back inside. I inched my way towards one of the birds and held it. I went to one of the bushes in the backyard and removed a cage, which I secured the bird in. You'll get me a pretty penny at the pet store. Hi, my name is Sophia. Give this video a thumbs up and smash that notification bell so you will know when more of our amazing stories are uploaded. I love my mother with all of my heart. She would always boast to other parents and teachers about how well behaved I was. How I was always obedient in class and always brought home excellent grades. My sister was an only child for a while and was adopted because my parents thought they couldn't have children. When she was about 6, Mom got pregnant and in 9 months, birthed a gorgeous baby girl, me. Dad, however, passed away when I was 10 years old, and even though Mom tried her best to keep us happy, I still felt a void in my spirit. In middle school, I began to pull pranks on other children and sometimes even teachers, and then blame it on the kids who always got in trouble. It was remarkably easy since I was the quiet child in the class and got straight A's. One time I told my mom that I had to get to school early to complete a group project, and I covered the entire classroom in foil. Another time, I attached a rubber snake to the teacher's cupboard, so when she opened it, the snake jumped out. The teacher was out for 2 weeks with a sprained ankle. Nobody suspected it was me. Well, no one besides my older sister, Paula.
Sophia, did you have anything to do with that foil prank?
The what? I looked up from my books and stared at her blankly.
You know, the person who covered the entire classroom in foil?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. I focused on the homework in front of me.
So why did you have Mom buy all of those rolls of foil? And why did you have to go to school so early this morning?
Well, I had to get there early for a group project. We are making solar panels in science class.
You may have everyone else fooled, but I know it was you.
Innocent until proven guilty. For someone who wants to be a lawyer, you should know that, I smirked. My sister shook her head and walked away. You see, Paula was in high school and I in middle school, but we were on the same campground. The pranks spread like wildfire, and the more they spread, the more pranks I did. When my sister was in high school, there was one prestigious college that she and her friends wanted to get into. When the time came, they all applied and waited anxiously for their acceptance letters. About 6 weeks later, Paula's friends began receiving their letters. Finally, hers arrived. She was ecstatic, and Mom and I were proud. However, her journey turned into sadness a few weeks later. She once tried again to tell Mom that I was responsible for a prank that was pulled at school, but Mom didn't believe her. Furious, I decided to teach my snitching sister a lesson. I downloaded a voice changer app on my phone, and when only my sister and I were at home, I put my plan into action. I called the house landline and waited.
Good afternoon. May I speak with Paula Archer, please?
I had to clear my throat to stop myself from laughing.
Hello, good afternoon, this is she. Who may I ask is calling?
Hi, Miss Archer. I am an administrator at Yale University, and we are sorry to inform you that we made an error on your admittance form. The person to be admitted was Paula Archibald, not Paula Archer. We are sincerely sorry about the mix-up. We do hope that you can still get into a fine college, or you can reapply next year. Have a good afternoon, Miss Archer. Goodbye.
I hung up the phone and stayed in my room for at least an hour before going outside to meet my sister, who was curled up in a ball on the sofa, aimlessly flipping through channels. Hey sis, I'm going to order a pizza. What do you want on yours? Paula didn't answer, so I went up to her and poked her on the head as I repeated the question. She threw off my hand, shot into a sitting position, and yelled,
I don't want any pizza, leave me alone.
Hearing the door unlock, knowing that Mom was home, I began to cry. I only asked you a simple question. There's no need to be mean about it. When Mom opened the door and saw Paula's angry face and my crying one, she asked what was going on. I told her that I only asked Paula what she wanted on her pizza, and she snapped at me. Mom scolded Paula and asked her why she did that.
You always take Sophia's side. I wish Dad was here. He was the only one who understood me.
Paula stormed off and left Mom and I in the living room. Later that night, Paula told Mom about the phone call, and Mom told Paula that she had other colleges that she got accepted into. And maybe that was God's way of telling her that Yale wasn't what's best for her. It took Paula a few days to tell her friends about the phone call. By that time, the deadline to submit your acceptance and pay part of the tuition had already passed. Mom even allowed her to have a sleepover, which I hated because her friends were so bossy. When I was watching a movie, Paula demanded that I hand them the remote and go to my room, which I obviously objected to. Paula and I began to fight over the remote, and I blurted out, "That's why I made that prank call, and you aren't going to Yale." Paula stopped and looked at me.
What did you say?
One of her friends replied,
I think she just said that the Yale call was a prank. You didn't.
I did. Paula screamed and tried to grab me, but I quickly moved myself out of the way. Mom rushed out of her bedroom.
What is all of this commotion about? Do you know what your daughter did?
Mom looked at me and Paula continued.
She was the one that called and pretended to be someone from Yale. She made me lose my spot. Paula, you are 17. You could have made the call to Yale to find out why. You lost your own spot because you didn't follow up. Don't blame Sophia.
I stuck my tongue out at Paula when Mom wasn't looking. Mom, can I watch TV in your room? Paula is being mean to me.
Sure, baby.
I smiled and skipped to Mom's room, jumped onto her bed, and flipped on the TV while Mom grilled Paula. Eventually, Paula got into a community college. I don't think she'll ever forgive me, though. Once I got into high school, I decided to up my pranks just a notch. As in, middle school teachers were none the wiser, but the students weren't as naive. In the cafeteria, while passing behind one of the girls named Becky, I threw some mashed potatoes at another student, Ryan. Ryan thought it was Becky, and even though she denied it, Ryan poured his juice over Becky's head, which started a food fight in the cafeteria. One of Becky's friends told the principal that I was the one who threw the food at Ryan. Becky then told her parents, and her parents wanted to meet with my mom the next day in the principal's office. Once I was seated in the principal's office, I cried to Mom and the principal and told them that Becky had been bullying me since the beginning of the year. I told them that Becky videotaped me while I was in the shower after gym, and she said that if I didn't do as she said, that she would post the video online. That day, I deserved an Oscar award. By the time I left the principal's office, Becky was grounded for a month and had to help clean the cafeteria for 2 weeks at school. I, on the other hand, went to the mall with Mom that day and got a cute new outfit. She was so sorry that I had to go through that ordeal with Becky. At high school, I strived to receive A's, as I loved the compliments that my teachers gave me, and it also kept me on their good side as the perfect student. After receiving the results of a test one afternoon in English class, my eyes widened when I realized I got a B. After class, I approached Mrs. Sharp. Mrs. Sharp, is it possible to redo the test so I can get an A?
I'm sorry, Sophia, but my mark is final. My workload is too much, and if I give you a chance to redo it, many other students will want the same chance. I'm sorry, just do better next time.
I watched her angrily as she picked up her belongings and walked out of the classroom. I was furious. How dare she refuse my right to receive an A? I got my chance for the best prank ever. It was at our annual Halloween show where Mrs. Sharp was the host. The afternoon before the show, I collected small lizards and placed them in a jar with holes. I got to the set early and climbed the ladder so I could be above the stage. I didn't even wait until 15 minutes in when I dropped a lizard on Mrs. Sharp's head. Then another and another. It wasn't until the 5th lizard was dropped and crawled into her bosom that she began to dance and scream, trying to get the scaly creature out. Most of the kids started to laugh, and the music teacher, Mr. James, tried to help her out, but her leg got stuck around the lights on the stage and she toppled over. I crept from the top of the stage and into the crowd. The next few minutes were chaotic, as an ambulance had to be called for Mrs. Sharp since her leg was twisted in an awkward position. Another teacher had to be prepared to take her place. Once everything had died down, the principal addressed the audience.
Good evening, parents, teachers, and students. What happened tonight is very unfortunate, and I believe it was a prank gone too far. This will be fully investigated, as our auditorium was recently equipped with security cameras.
What? I thought to myself as I looked up and noticed the cameras staring at me.
Our teachers and students have worked hard on this talent show, so let us enjoy the rest of the night. If anyone needs me, I'll be in my office checking the security camera.
I need to get to the office before the principal does. I darted across the picnic area of the school and to the administration building. The building was in darkness, and I pushed the door, delighted that it was open. I figured that since admin was on the compound, but that wasn't it. I was able to make my way to the principal's office and sit in his chair when the lights came on and the vice principal opened the door and looked at me. She was on the phone. Sir, your plan worked, and you wouldn't believe who was behind it. The vice principal ordered me to sit in the chair outside the principal's office. A few minutes later, the principal arrived with a bottle of lizards in his hand and ushered me into his office.
Miss Archer, I'm surprised that you were the culprit behind this.
I opened my mouth to respond, but he put his hand up to stop me.
If we test this jar for fingerprints, will your prints be on it? And before you answer, know that your response will have consequences.
The principal rested the jar on his desk. I sighed heavily. Yes, sir, my prints will be on the jar. The principal looked at the door.
Ah, Mrs. Archer, thank you for joining us.
I looked towards the door, and there stood my mother. She looked heartbroken.
Have a seat, Mrs. Archer.
Mom silently sat in the seat next to mine. I couldn't bring myself to look in her direction. The principal then turned to me.
You see, Miss Archer, even though the cameras are up, they're not yet up and running. I told Mrs. Wilson what happened, and I told her that if my suspicions are correct, the person who pulled the prank would try to get to the tape before I did. What I didn't expect is for our top student to be the mastermind of such a horrendous prank.
I was caught red-handed, and there was nothing I could do about it. I couldn't deny what I did. I listened to the principal and Mom talk about the possibility of Mrs. Sharp pressing charges and me heading to a juvenile detention facility. After their discussion, Mom turned to me.
I can't believe Paula was right about you this whole time. I allowed my love for you to blind me, but that will no longer be the case here. I will call Paula tomorrow and apologize to her, and so will you. Whatever the principal and Mrs. Sharp think is the proper punishment, I will support them.
I was not only expelled from my school, but Mrs. Sharp's husband made sure that she pressed charges, and I was sentenced to 2 years in juvie on assault charges. I'm not upset by what was done. If anything, I will never pull another prank in my life again. Paula came to visit me every weekend, and our relationship grew significantly. My relationship with Mom was never the same. Mrs. Sharp even checked on me a few times to make sure I was okay. She said she had forgiven me and that I hoped I learned my lesson. After I was released from juvie, I found every person I ever pranked and apologized. Some people forgave me, some people didn't, and I was okay with that. I've decided to study psychology as a degree because I want to learn about myself and hopefully help other boys and girls who may have been messed up a little bit as I was.